So I'm a discussant in the lung oral session, and there's 3 abstracts, but potentially 2 that are of particular interest because they're quite close together, which is the use of an anti-PD-L1 agent called Atezolizumab during or after radiation treatment. So one of these trials, the SWOG, a randomized trial, which is looking at stereotactic body radiotherapy, SBRT or SABR, for early stage non-small cell lung cancer, investigated whether adding Atezolizumab before as a priming dose, during radiation and after radiation improved outcomes. This was a negative trial. It was a randomized phase 3 trial of over 400 patients that stopped early because of futility. And the reason for this is there was no signal for improvement of the primary endpoint, which is progression-free survival. There was some increased signal for toxicity, so some of the adverse events rates were higher. But overall, the study probably indicates that there could be some role for atezolizumab in these patients, but only if they're potentially selected a little bit better. There's some questions out of this trial as well, which is that there was no patient selection for atezolizumab. Often in some of the other corollary trials we see with atezolizumab, they use a PDL-TPS score of greater than 1% or greater than 50% to be able to better select as a biomarker for response. And this was an all-comer population. The other question is whether or not patients with driver mutations were included. So there's no information about actual driver mutations in this study, and potentially some of these patients may not have benefited from checkpoint blockade inhibition anyway, and therefore these patients may not have been the best people to include in the trial. And finally, the control arm had a really good outcome. The progression rate in the control arm of SBRT alone was only 11%, which really sets the bar extremely high for improving outcomes in patients with early stage non-small cell lung cancer. The other study that was worth discussing is the Achilles trial, which is from Norway. This is a multi-center randomized phase 2 trial in which patients received the standard of care for limited stage small cell lung cancer, which is chemoradiation therapy and twice daily radiotherapy. It was investigator choice. The investigators could either give twice daily radiotherapy to 45 gray or even a longer course and more intense to 60 gray. And the use of prophylactic cranial radiation was also optional in this study. This study looked at adjuvant atezolizumab, so after the completion of the chemoradiation therapy to give atezolizumab for a period of a year. This was also a negative study in which it didn't improve the progression-free survival or overall survival of these patients. And it indicates, again, that atezolizumab probably needs to be better selected in patients, not perhaps an all-comer population. But also there were some intriguing findings out of this study. The dose of 60 gray, so twice daily radiotherapy to 60 gray, which is something that's uniquely Norwegian in a way, was shown to have probably a bit of an indication for a trend for better survival. And those patients receiving PCI as well, prophylactic cranial radiation, had a trend for better survival than those patients not receiving PCI. These are small subgroups, so we can't get too much out of this data, but it certainly does indicate that radiation matters, and how we give it and the dose and where we give it is really important as well. The investigators from the Achilles trial are taking the study forward into a randomized phase 3 trial, in which they're investigating that specific question of whether twice daily radiotherapy to 45 gray or to 60 gray will improve overall outcomes. But in this setting, they're going to use a different drug, durvalumab, which is now approved based on the Adriatic study outcomes, and that will be the future of that trial.